Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to find out they wanted you gone? My name is Margaret, and I'm going to tell you about the worst week of my life. It started on a Tuesday morning when my son pushed me into the ocean. But that's not even the craziest part. When I came back home that same evening, alive and ready for revenge, I had a special surprise waiting for them. Let me start from the beginning, because understanding how I got there makes the story even more unbelievable. I was 67 years old and thought I had everything figured out. My husband Robert and I had been married for 40 years. We built a computer company together from nothing. We started in our garage, just like you hear in movies, and grew it into something worth billions of dollars. Robert died 2 years ago from a heart attack. It was sudden and devastating. One day he was there, laughing at breakfast, and the next day he was gone. The doctors said it was quick and he didn't suffer, but I suffered. I suffered a lot. After Robert died, I inherited everything. $3 billion. It sounds like a dream, doesn't it? But money doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't laugh at your jokes or hold your hand when you're scared. I had my son David, though. He was 42 years old, married to Vanessa for 10 years. I thought they would be my comfort in old age. I thought wrong. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I ignored. About 6 months after Robert died, David started visiting more often. At first, I was happy. I thought he finally wanted to spend time with his mother. But he always had questions. Mum, have you updated your will? Mum, who's managing your money now? Mum, have you thought about what happens to everything when you're gone? I should have been suspicious, but I was lonely and sad, and I wanted to believe my son cared about me, not my money. Then there was the hip surgery. I fell down some stairs at my condo and needed a hip replacement. It was David's idea that I have the surgery at a specific hospital. He said they were the best, and he knew a doctor there. During my recovery, David and Vanessa visited every day. They brought papers for me to sign. Just hospital bills, Mom. Just insurance forms. Don't worry about reading all the small print, you need to rest. I signed everything. Why wouldn't I trust my own son? After I got home from the hospital, strange things started happening. My medicine bottles got mixed up. I took the wrong pills and ended up in the emergency room. The doctors were confused because they said someone must have switched the labels. Thought it was just an accident, Doc. Then there was David's birthday party. They told me it was a quiet family dinner, but when I arrived, there were 20 strangers in the house. Everyone was yelling, "Surprise!" And I just stood there, confused and overwhelmed. Vanessa took a picture of me at that exact moment, standing there looking lost and bewildered. That picture would come back to haunt me, on that Tuesday morning. My phone rang. It was David, calling from his own phone, not through his assistant. That should have been my first clue that something was wrong. David never called me directly anymore. "Mom," he said, sounding happy and warm. "I have wonderful news. Vanessa and I just bought a yacht, and we want to take you out to celebrate your recovery from surgery. Just the 3 of us, like a real family." My heart swelled with hope. Maybe things were going back to normal. Maybe they really did love me. "I'd love that," I said. "Perfect. Meet us at the marina at 10 a.m. And Mom? Wear something nice. We're going to take pictures." I spent an hour getting ready. I chose my navy blue dress, the one Robert always said made my eyes sparkle. I did my makeup carefully, and even wore the pearl necklace Robert gave me on our 30th anniversary. Took a taxi to the marina because David said they'd bring me home. The marina was beautiful that morning, with boats bobbing gently in the water and seagulls crying overhead. It was the kind of perfect morning that makes you think good things are coming. The yacht was magnificent. It was 42 feet long, painted gleaming white, with a blue stripe along the side. It probably cost $3 or $4 million. I remember thinking how successful David must be to afford something like that. What I didn't know was that he'd bought it with my money. $3 million. I'd given him last year to invest in his business consulting firm. David greeted me at the dock with a big hug. But something felt wrong about it. It was too tight, too long. Like he was trying to convince himself he still loved me. Vanessa was on the deck wearing designer sunglasses and a white sundress. She smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Welcome aboard, Margaret," she said. She never called me Mom, even though I'd asked her to many times over the years. The first hour was actually pleasant. We sailed out into calm waters. The Massachusetts coastline got smaller and smaller behind us. Vanessa served mimosas, orange juice and champagne, and we sat on the deck enjoying the sunshine. David talked about their plans. They wanted to sail to the Caribbean next month. They were thinking about buying a house in Florida. They were considering adopting a child. That last part surprised me. David and Vanessa had always said they didn't want children. They said kids were too expensive and time-consuming. "I thought you didn't want to be parents," I said. "We changed our minds," Vanessa said quickly. "We realized that family is important. Legacy is important." Then David started asking his questions. "Mum, have you thought more about your will? We were talking to our lawyer, and he said your current setup is really complicated. If something happened to you, it would take years to sort everything out." "I have good lawyers," I said. "Everything is organized." "But Mum," David leaned forward, refilling my champagne glass even though I'd barely touched it. "What if there was an easier way? What if you just transferred everything to us now, while you're alive? Then there'd be no probate, no lawyers, no waiting. We could take care of you properly." That's when I noticed Vanessa recording me with her phone. She was holding it casually, like she was taking selfies, but the camera was pointed at me. She was recording me drinking, recording me talking about money, building evidence of something. My stomach dropped. Suddenly everything made sense. The mixed-up medicine, the surprise party photo, the hospital papers, the questions about money. They had been planning this for a long time. "David," I said, setting down my glass carefully, "I want to go back to shore. Now." David's smile disappeared. His face went hard and cold, a face I'd never seen before on my own son. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Mom." Vanessa put down her phone and moved closer. She wasn't pretending to be nice anymore. "Margaret, we need to talk about your health," she said. "You've been showing signs of dementia, memory problems, confusion. We have it all documented. Doctors agree that you can't manage your money anymore." "That's insane," I said. "I'm perfectly fine." "Are you?" David pulled out a folder of papers. "What about when you took the wrong medicine and ended up in the hospital? What about when you got confused at my birthday party? What about all the bills you forgot to pay?" I hadn't forgotten any bills, but I realized they must have intercepted my mail, created problems that didn't exist, built a case against me. "We're trying to help you," Vanessa said, but her eyes were cold. "Sign these papers, transfer everything to us for your own protection, and we can all go home happy." I looked at the papers. I looked at my son's face, this stranger who used to be my little boy. I looked at the ocean, vast and dangerous. "No," I said. "I won't sign anything. Take me back to shore right now, or I'll call the Coast Guard." I reached for my purse, but Vanessa grabbed it first. "Looking for your phone?" She held it up, then tossed it overboard. I watched it disappear into the blue water. "Mum, don't make this harder than it needs to be," David said. "We've thought this through very carefully. You sign the papers, or Well, tragic accidents happen all the time to elderly people, especially ones recovering from surgery who maybe took too many pain pills and got confused on a boat. My own son was threatening to kill me. You're insane if you think you'll get away with this. I said. Actually, we've planned it perfectly, Vanessa said. She was still recording everything on her phone. We have videos of you drinking, looking confused, talking about not remembering things. We have medical records showing your memory problems. We have witness statements from friends who've noticed your decline. All fake. All manufactured. All lies, but very convincing lies. I stood up slowly. My hip still hurt from the surgery, but adrenaline was making everything sharp and clear. I won't do it, I said. I raised you, David. I taught you right from wrong. I paid for your education, your wedding, your house. And this is how you repay me. For just a second, I saw something flicker in David's eyes. Guilt, maybe. Regret. But then Vanessa touched his arm and his face went hard again. It's not personal, Mom. It's just business. Business? I'm your mother. And I'm about to be very rich, David said. That's when Vanessa moved behind me. I felt her hands on my back. Say hi to the sharks, she whispered in my ear. Then she pushed Dot. It wasn't a violent shove. They were too smart for that. Just a firm push when I was off balance. Looking out at the water, Dot, I fell over the railing and hit the water hard. The cold was shocking. The Atlantic Ocean in June is not warm, and the sudden temperature change made me gasp. Water filled my mouth and nose. My dress wrapped around my legs, pulling me down, Dot, as I sank beneath the surface. I could hear David shouting above. Mom, oh God, Mom. Man overboard. But I also heard Vanessa's voice, lower and calm, talking on a phone. Yes, file the emergency petition Monday morning. She's clearly not competent. We'll need to move fast. Then the water closed over my head completely. I'm a good swimmer. Robert and I used to swim laps together every morning in our pool. But swimming in a pool in your bathing suit is very different from swimming in the ocean in a dress and shoes while recovering from hip surgery. I kicked off my shoes first. Expensive leather pumps that Robert had bought me years ago. They sank immediately. Then I fought my way to the surface, kicking hard with my legs even though my hip screamed in pain. I broke through and gasped for air. The yacht was already moving away from me. They were leaving me there to die, just like they'd planned. I tried to wave my arms, tried to shout, but they didn't look back. David and Vanessa stood on the deck for a moment, watching me struggle, then turned and went inside the cabin. The yacht's engines roared louder and it sped away across the water, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a white dot on the horizon, was alone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. I tried not to panic. Panic makes you breathe too fast, makes you sink. I remembered Robert teaching me to float on my back, to save energy, to stay calm. But I was so cold. My teeth were chattering. My dress was pulling me down. I knew I couldn't last long out here. That's when I saw the fishing boat, Dot. The boat was small and old, with peeling paint and rusty equipment. It was called the Molly Sue, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. A man stood at the wheel, older, maybe 60, with weathered skin and a kind face. Next to him was a teenage boy, probably his grandson. I waved my arms and tried to shout, but I was so tired and cold that barely any sound came out. But they saw me. Holy hell! The man shouted. Tyler, there's someone in the water. The boat turned toward me. The man, I'd later learn his name was Captain Jake Morrison, threw out a life preserver. I grabbed it with numb fingers. Together, Jake and Tyler hauled me up the side of the boat. I collapsed on the deck, shaking so hard I thought my bones would break. Jake wrapped me in blankets that smelled like fish and motor oil and salt water. Tyler started the engine while Jake radioed for help. What happened to you? Jake asked. How'd you end up in the ocean? My family. I managed through chattering teeth. They yacht. Left me . Jake's face darkened. We saw that yacht take off like a bat out of hell. Didn't look back once. What kind of people leave someone drowning in the middle of the ocean? The kind who want $3 billion, I thought. But I couldn't say it. I was too cold, too shocked, too exhausted. Jake was already on the radio. Coast Guard, this is the Molly Sue. We've got a woman we pulled from the water about 12 miles southeast of Gloucester. She's conscious and responsive but needs medical attention. Wait. I grabbed Jake's arm with surprising strength. Please, don't tell them you found me. Not yet. Jake looked at me carefully. He had the kind of eyes that had seen a lot of life, good and bad. You in some kind of trouble, Mom? Yes, but not the kind you're thinking. Please. I need to get to shore without anyone knowing I survived. Tyler looked at his grandfather uncertainly. Grandpa, shouldn't are funny things, Tyler, Jake said slowly. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look like following the rules. He keyed the radio again. Coast Guard, this is Molly Sue. False alarm on that rescue. Turned out to be debris in the water. We're all clear. As Jake's boat headed toward a small private dock, I told them everything. About David and Vanessa. About the money. About their plan. About being pushed off the yacht. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. So they figured they'd rather be rich orphans than broke kids with a living mother, Jake said when I finished. Apparently. What are you going to do now? That was the question, wasn't it? I was officially dead as far as David and Vanessa knew. They'd go back to shore, report me missing overboard, play the grieving family while they executed their plan. But here's the thing about being supposedly dead. It gives you options you never had while you were alive. I'm going to let them think they won, I said. And then I'm going to destroy them. Jake grinned for the first time. Now that sounds like a plan worth helping with. We docked at a tiny cove I'd never seen before. Jake knew a woman there who ran a small bed and breakfast. Mrs. Chen was in her 70s, tough-looking, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at my bedraggled state and immediately started heating soup. She didn't ask any questions. She just showed me to a room, gave me dry clothes, and brought me hot chicken broth. Honey, I've been running this place for 30 years, she said. I've seen people running from all kinds of things. Long as you're not bringing violence to my door, you're welcome here. That evening, while David and Vanessa were presumably filing police reports about their tragically missing mother, I sat in Mrs. Chen's kitchen planning their downfall. That first night at Mrs. Chen's place, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the cold water closing over my head, heard Vanessa's whisper about sharks, saw David's face as he watched me fall. Mrs. Chen had an old computer with internet access. At 2 a.m., I sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and searched for my own name. The news articles came up immediately. Wealthy widow dies in tragic boating accident. Margaret Harrison, 67, lost at sea during family outing. Tech fortune heir grieves mother's sudden death. I read every article, each one more painful than the last. David had given multiple interviews. He talked about how worried he'd been about my declining mental state in recent months. He described me as confused and forgetful. He said they'd taken me on the boat trip to cheer me up, to help me feel better. Mom seemed happy, David was quoted as saying. She was enjoying the sunshine and the water. We went inside for just a moment to get lunch ready, and when we came back out, she was gone. We searched everywhere, called the Coast Guard immediately, but she just vanished. Vanessa had apparently sobbed to reporters. We should have watched her more carefully. She'd been so disoriented lately. We blame ourselves for not realizing how serious her condition was. They'd even included that photo from David's birthday party. Me standing there looking bewildered with a drink in my hand. The caption read, "Margaret Harrison at a family gathering last year, where friends noticed signs of confusion." My obituary was already posted online. Margaret Harrison, beloved mother, passed away in a tragic boating accident while enjoying an outing with her devoted family. She is survived by her son David and daughter-in-law Vanessa. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to the Alzheimer's Association. Even in my fake death, they were pushing the narrative of mental decline. I closed the laptop and put my head in my hands. "They thought of everything," I said to Mrs. Chum, who had come downstairs and was making more tea. "Almost everything," she corrected. "They didn't think someone would fish you out of the ocean. They didn't think you'd be smart enough to stay hidden. And they certainly didn't think you'd fight back." She was right. I had advantages they didn't know about. I was alive when they thought I was dead. I knew their plan when they thought it was secret. And I had help. "Tell me about Jake," I said. "Why did he help me?" "He doesn't even know me." Mrs. Chun smiled. "Jake's wife died of cancer 5 years ago. Her family tried to take everything. The house, the boat, the business, claiming Jake wasn't capable of managing things on his own. They called him an old drunk, said he was neglecting her medical care, spread terrible lies. Jake fought them in court and won, but it nearly destroyed him. He doesn't tolerate people who prey on others, especially family members who betray trust. So he knows what it feels like. He knows exactly what it feels like." And Tyler, his grandson, watched his mother, Jake's daughter, go through a similar thing with her ex-husband. That boy has seen enough family betrayal to last a lifetime. I realized I wasn't alone in this. There were good people who understood, who would help. 3 days after my death, Jake drove me to the cemetery. We parked far away behind a maintenance shed that gave us a perfect view of the proceedings through binoculars. My funeral was surprisingly well attended. David had spared no expense. There was a beautiful casket, empty of course, surrounded by elaborate flower arrangements. A professional program with my photo on the front. A priest giving a sermon about my generous spirit and loving nature. David and Vanessa stood at the graveside in perfectly coordinated black outfits. They accepted condolences from friends, business associates, and people I barely recognized. What hurt most was seeing how many people genuinely mourned me. My neighbor Eleanor was crying openly. My book club friends had come together, hugging each other and dabbing their eyes. Even Dr. Peterson, who performed my hip surgery, was there looking somber. These people really cared about me. And David and Vanessa were accepting their sympathy while knowing full well I was alive somewhere in the ocean. "See anything interesting?" Jake whispered beside me. "Look at who's not there," I said, lowering my binoculars. "Like who?" "My financial advisor, Richard Barnes. My lawyer, Patricia Walsh. My accountant, Michael Torres. The people who would normally be at the funeral of a client worth $3 billion are nowhere to be seen." Jake adjusted his own binoculars. "Maybe they're busy with estate stuff? Maybe. Or maybe they can't look people in the eye while they're part of this scheme." I watched David give a eulogy. He talked about what a wonderful mother I'd been. How much he'd loved me. How devastated he was by my loss. He even cried. Real tears that rolled down his cheeks. For a moment, I almost believed him. Almost thought maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. That perhaps this really was just a tragic accident and I was seeing conspiracies where none existed. Then I saw him check his watch during his own emotional speech. He was timing it, making sure he cried for exactly the right amount of time. It was all performance. After the service, people lingered, sharing memories of me. But David and Vanessa worked the crowd like politicians at a campaign event, shaking hands, accepting hugs, and then quickly ushering people away whenever anyone asked detailed questions about my final days. "They're good at this," Jake observed. "They've had a year to practice," I said bitterly. That night, Jake dropped me off 3 blocks from my former home in Beacon Hill, the house where I'd lived with Robert for 35 years, the house where I'd raised David, the house I'd signed over to him because I thought family meant something. It was after midnight. The street was quiet except for occasional cars passing by. I still had my key. David had never thought to ask for it back. I slipped around to the back door like a criminal breaking into my own former home. The house felt wrong. Not empty, but changed somehow. Different. I used the flashlight Jake had given me, being careful to avoid windows facing the street. In the living room, furniture was covered with sheets, but I could see new pieces had been added. Expensive pieces. A leather sofa that cost more than most people's annual salary. An entertainment center with the latest technology. In the kitchen, the refrigerator was stocked with fresh food. Not basic items you'd keep in a house you occasionally visited, but expensive specialty foods. Imported cheese. Organic vegetables. Fresh fruit. The kind of premium items that suggested someone was living here regularly. I made my way upstairs to what used to be Robert's office. The desk was covered with documents, legal papers, financial statements, and something that made my blood run cold. A detailed timeline labeled The Margaret Project. My own name turned into a code word for my elimination. I photographed everything with the disposable camera Jake had given me, my hands shaking with rage as I read through their plans. They'd been working on this for over a year. Every doctor visit where I'd seemed confused. They'd coached me beforehand, given me wrong information, made me look incompetent. Every social situation where I'd appeared disoriented, they deliberately set me up. The birthday party photo wasn't an accident. They'd specifically not told me it was a surprise party, then captured my confused reaction. The medication mix-up that landed me in the emergency room 3 months ago. They'd switched my prescription bottles on purpose. Every moment of confusion, every instance where I'd seemed off balance or forgetful, had been carefully orchestrated and documented as evidence of dementia. But the most chilling document was a letter from someone signed only as Mount. The timeline needs to be accelerated. Margaret's been asking too many questions about the power of attorney documents. If she gets suspicious and goes to a lawyer independently, everything falls apart. I recommend moving to Phase 3 within the next 2 weeks. Phase 3, according to the timeline, was my death. I was photographing the last document when I heard a car door slam outside. Headlights swept across the front windows. David and Vanessa were coming home. Quickly gathered my things and headed for the back door. But I could hear their conversation as they entered through the front. "Think the Peterson woman bought it?" Vanessa's voice. "She was crying too hard to think straight," David replied. "Besides, what's she going to investigate? Mum fell off a boat. It happens." "What about the will? How long before probate?" "Opens Monday. MT says we'll have full access to the accounts within 6 weeks." I slipped out the back door and into the garden, my heart pounding. But as I crept along the side of the house toward the street, I heard something that stopped me cold. A baby crying. There was a baby in my former house. A baby that David and Vanessa had never mentioned to anyone. I crouched behind the rose bushes I'd planted 20 years ago, listening to the sound of an infant crying. Through the window, I could see David pick up a baby from a bassinet. He was awkward with it, holding it stiffly like someone who'd never held a baby before. Vanessa came into view, taking the baby from him. She was better at it, but still seemed uncomfortable, like she was handling something fragile and unfamiliar. "We need to hire that nurse full-time," David said. "I can't keep doing this." "We will, once the estate settles," Vanessa replied. "But we have to be careful. Too many people asking questions about a baby that appeared right after Margaret died. Nobody knows about him yet. We'll announce it in a few weeks. Say he was born early, and we kept it private for health reasons. And if anyone asks about pregnancy photos doctor visits, we say we kept it private. It's nobody's business. I watched them with the baby. These two people who tried to murder me, now holding an infant whose origins they clearly wanted to hide. Where had this baby come from? Why were they keeping it secret? What did it have to do with their plan to steal my money?" Jake picked me up at the corner 15 minutes later. I was still shaking as I climbed into his truck. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. "Worse. I've seen my replacement." The next morning, Mrs. Chen made a phone call. She knew a private investigator in town who owed her a favor. The kind of favor where my grandson didn't go to jail for something stupid he did when he was 22. She explained. Danny Crawford. Former cop. Very reliable. By noon, I was sitting in Danny's small office above a sandwich shop in downtown Gloucester. He was about 50, with prematurely grey hair and alert eyes that missed nothing. I told him everything. The yacht. The push. David and Vanessa's plan. The mysterious baby. The documents in the house. Danny listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. "So you want me to follow your son and daughter-in-law, find out about this baby, and identify their co-conspirator?" He summarized. "That's right. And you're paying me with what? Because according to the newspapers, all your assets are frozen pending probate." I pulled out an envelope of cash. Robert had always insisted we keep emergency money in a safety deposit box that only I knew about. $50,000 in cash. For emergencies. This definitely qualified. Danny counted the money and nodded. "This'll cover 2 weeks of surveillance. I'll need photos of the targets and any addresses where they might be staying." I gave him everything I had, including copies of the photos I'd taken at the house. Danny studied them carefully, paying special attention to the documents with the Mount signature. "This handwriting looks familiar," he said, pulling out a magnifying glass. "Professional, educated, but with some distinctive characteristics. Mind if I run this through some databases?" "Do whatever you need to do." "One more thing," Danny said as I prepared to leave. "If these people are as dangerous as you say, we need a safety protocol. You check in with me every 12 hours. If I don't hear from you, I take everything to the police." I agreed, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that.